the barren planet of Varus. 9 stretched out beneath a bruised sky, its jagged rocks and dust-streaked plains whispering secrets only the wind could hear. Perched on a craggy ledge overlooking the desolation, Whitefeather adjusted her scope, eyes narrowed behind the cold glass. The sniper rifle rested steady in her gloved hands, an extension of herself honed by countless battles and endless nights spent lying in wait. Beside her, Kale moved with practiced ease, fingers dancing over a holographic map flickering with enemy movements. They were a pair united by necessity and trust, a symbiotic force against a universe teetering on chaos. Kale glanced up, voice low yet sharp. Movement in Sector 7. Hostile patrols doubling their sweep. They might have picked up our signal. Whitefeather's jaw tightened, a subtle crease forming between her brows. Then we don't have long. Stay sharp. The Marauders had never been subtle. Their raids were brutal, merciless acts of plunder that left entire colonies in ruin. Yet here, on this forsaken frontier, Whitefeather and Kale were humanity's last eyes and ears. A vital line of defense, watching, waiting. A crackle burst through Kale's comm unit. "Captain, we have incoming." His voice barely rose above a whisper, but the tension thickened instantly. Whitefeather's grip tightened on her rifle. They'd been exposed. The first explosion shattered the distant ridge, a blast that sent plumes of dust and rock into the red sky. Marauder dropships, black as void itself, descended in formation. Whitefeather's comm shattered with the impact of gunfire erupting from the ridges. "Move," she ordered. Kale darted toward the communication outpost, fingers flying across panels to send an emergency distress signal. Whitefeather provided cover, her shots cutting through the smoke and dust with deadly precision. She had become a phantom among the ruins, every shot swift, precise, and silent. But the Marauders were relentless. More dropships clawed through the air, Marines pouring out in lethal waves. Kale's fingers trembled on the console. "I'm pinned. They're breaching the perimeter," he yelled. Whitefeather's eyes flicked to the distant silhouette of the Marauder captain leading the charge, Zarak. A towering figure clad in jagged armor, his presence commanding fear and obedience. His gaze locked onto Kale, calculating. The realization settled heavy in Whitefeather's gut. Kale was their true target. She moved swiftly, positioning herself between Kale and the oncoming tide of Marauder soldiers. Her voice was steady but urgent. "Run, Kale. Find cover." He hesitated but obeyed, disappearing behind a crumbling wall. The Marauders closed in fast. Explosions rocked the ground as the outpost began to collapse. Whitefeather's breath steadied despite the chaos, each shot a lifeline thrown into the abyss. She saw Kale caught in a crossfire near the command center, pinned beneath the weight of a fallen beam. Without hesitation, she sprinted to him, hoisting the debris aside as bullets tore through the air. "Kale, get up," she hissed. His face was pale, eyes wide with pain and fear. "They're coming," he gasped. "Take the shot, don't let them win." Before she could respond, the Marauders swarmed them, overwhelming the outpost with sheer numbers. Whitefeather fought like a tempest, but every shot spent was a step closer to exhaustion. Kale was dragged away, struggling but powerless. Whitefeather's scream was lost amid the roaring guns. Bound and beaten, Kale was thrown into the cold metallic hold of the Marauder ship. The harsh clang of the door closing echoed like a death knell. Captain Zarak approached, his voice low and venomous. "You're valuable, spotter. Tell me where Whitefeather hides, and your death will be swift." Kale's jaw clenched. "I don't know where she is. And even if I did, you'd never catch her." Zarak's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We'll see." Back on the jagged surface, Whitefeather crouched in the shadow of a shattered communications tower, eyes burning with fury and resolve. She watched the Marauder ship's engines ignite, propelling her partner away. The loss seared deep, but despair was a stranger to her spirit. Her mind raced through every possible scenario, every weakness in the enemy's armor. She thought of Kale, his loyalty, his courage. Failure was not an option. The galaxy had come to fear Whitefeather not just because of her deadly aim, but because she never left a partner behind. Pulling her cloak tight, she melted into the jagged terrain, becoming one with the planet's shadows. The hunt had begun, and White Feather was already on the trail. The distant hum of the Marauder ship grew faint as the horizon swallowed it, but the fire in her eyes burned brighter than ever. With every heartbeat, she plotted her next move, knowing that rescue was not merely a mission, it was a promise. The wind whispered around her, carrying the echoes of battle and the promise of vengeance. Somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, Kale waited, a pawn in the hands of ruthless enemies. And somewhere in the darkness, White Feather prepared to become their nightmare. The night deepened, but her resolve was unyielding. The story was far from over. The void between stars was endless and indifferent, but White Feather's mind was razor-sharp, focused entirely on the distant flicker of the Marauder ship's beacon. Every data pulse, every faint electronic signature was a clue, a thread unraveling the mystery of Kale's captivity. She had slipped through the wastelands of Varus 9, moving like a ghost into the labyrinth of space traffic and hidden outposts. Her connection to the galaxy's undercurrents was a skill honed through years surviving on the razor's edge. Nothing escaped her attention. Her ship, a sleek scout vessel patched with layers of stealth tech and enhanced sensors, hummed with life beneath her fingertips. The cockpit's holographic displays projected the Marauder ship's position, locked onto the irregular patterns of its engines. The distant station, a fortress of cold metal and shadows, loomed in the starfield, a crucible where Kale was held captive and where White Feather's patience would be tested. She tightened her grip on the console. "I'm coming for you, Kale. Hold on." Communications chatter crackled through her encrypted channels. Marauder guards exchanged terse commands, unaware their conversation was being intercepted by the very hunter they pursued. White Feather's fingers danced across the interface, filtering and decoding the hostile transmissions. Each word painted a grim picture. Kale was confined deep within the station's prison sector, guarded by layers of security and elite soldiers loyal to Captain Zarak. The captain was growing impatient, threatening severe reprisals if Kale did not talk. White Feather's lips pressed into a thin line. This was no ordinary rescue. The Marauders were ruthless, and their stronghold was a fortress designed to crush hope. But White Feather thrived in darkness and danger. It was where legends were forged. As her ship slipped closer to the station's orbit, she prepared. Her arsenal was a blend of lethal precision and cunning technology. Silenced weapons, camo cloaks that bent light, hacking tools designed to dismantle security protocols. Every piece was calibrated for one purpose: infiltration and extraction. Docking silently, she slipped through the station's shadowed corridors like a wraith. Each step was calculated. The faintest noise could spell doom. She disabled surveillance cameras with a flick of her wrist, rendering them blind. Patrols moved past her unaware, their senses dulled by routine. White Feather was anything but routine. Her mind raced through scenarios. Every guard she incapacitated was a gamble, a thread unraveling the Marauder web. She planted electronic scramblers at strategic junctions, instruments that would sow confusion when the alarm inevitably rang. This station was their stronghold, but it was vulnerable, if struck with precision. Deeper inside, Kale sat in a stark cell, his wrists chafed by the cold metal shackles. He bore the marks of harsh interrogation, but his spirit remained unbroken. Captain Zarak loomed over him, a shadow of menace and obsession. "White Feather won't come," the captain snarled. "Give me a name, a location, something, or you'll suffer." Kale met his gaze without flinching. "She's not coming for me because she's smarter than you think." The defiance in his voice was a spark against the dark. Back in the corridors, White Feather's heart pounded, but her expression remained unreadable. She moved like liquid shadow, every muscle poised. The tension of the hunt wrapped around her like a cloak. The enemy was close, but so was her determination. Suddenly, an alarm blared, sharp, grating, a scream of detection. Her scramblers were triggered prematurely. Marauder troops flooded the corridors, their boots pounding, weapons raised. White Feather dove into the shadows, breath steady, mind sharp. She fired with surgical precision, each shot silent and deadly, thinning the ranks without giving away her position. The Marauders faltered, disoriented by the chaos as her planted traps exploded in strategic points. Sparks and smoke filled the air, alarms echoed, but the sniper's presence was a ghostly whisper. Kale's voice crackled in her earpiece, weak but alive. "Feather, I'm still here. Don't stop." A surge of resolve swept through her. The station's prison sector was close, but so was danger. Reinforcements were mobilizing. She moved faster, guided by her instincts and the faint glow of Kale's signal beacon. Time was slipping. Every second was a thread in a tightening noose. The Marauders were relentless, but White Feather was relentless too, a hunter bound by loyalty and sharpened by loss. She crouched behind a reinforced bulkhead, recalibrating her rifle, eyes scanning every shadow for movement. The cold metal hummed beneath her fingertips, a familiar weight. Kale was counting on her. The galaxy was watching. A distant explosion rocked the station, a signal she had triggered earlier, a signal to sow confusion and fracture the enemy's focus. Soldiers screamed orders, their discipline cracking under pressure. White Feather whispered to herself, "Almost there." Her breath slowed, her heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the hunt. The door to Kale's cell was ahead, fortified and watched by two heavily armed guards. She studied their patrol pattern, timing her move with deadly precision. With a pulse of her hacking device, the locks disengaged silently. The guards turned just as she appeared, her presence a flash of lethal intent. 2 quick shots, no noise, no mercy. The path was clear. Kale stumbled forward, pain etched into every step, but relief flooding his eyes. "You came," he breathed. White Feather's gaze was fierce. "I promised I would." Together, they slipped into the shadows of the station's labyrinth, but the Marauders were not defeated. Captain Zarak's voice thundered through the comm channels. "White Feather is inside. Find her. Kill her. Now." The station erupted into chaos once more. Traps exploded, corridors flooded with reinforcements. Yet through it all, White Feather and Kale moved like shadows, invisible and unstoppable. The hunt was far from over. The walls closed in, but so did their resolve. Every heartbeat, every breath was a countdown to freedom, or death. White Feather's mind raced ahead to the coming storm. She had found Kale, but escaping meant facing the full fury of the Marauders' wrath. The legend of White Feather was no longer just a whisper. It was a roar. As alarms screamed and boots thundered, the pair vanished into the maze of steel and darkness, ready to turn the hunters into the hunted. The galaxy held its breath. And the hunt had only just begun. White Feather's breath was a steady rhythm against the rising chaos within the cold steel corridors of the Marauder station. The flickering lights cast long shadows that danced with every pulse of the emergency alarms, but she moved with calculated precision, every step measured, every motion deliberate. Kale, though weakened from captivity and interrogation, followed closely behind, supported by the strength of his fierce will and her unwavering presence. The prison cell's door hissed open under the silent command of her hacking device, the intricate lock mechanisms falling away like fragile glass. Kale stumbled out, his legs unsteady but determination ignited by her arrival. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, a silent exchange of resilience and hope. "We have to move fast," White Feather whispered, scanning the corridor beyond. But the Marauders were already closing in. Captain Zarak appeared at the far end of the hallway, flanked by a squad of elite warriors whose armor gleamed with cold menace. His gaze was sharp, lips curling into a sneer that spoke of 1,000 brutal victories and a deep-seated hatred for the woman who had become his nemesis. "White Feather," he spat, "you think your reputation will save you. Here, you will die like the rest." White Feather's grip tightened on her rifle, but she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, voice calm but ice-cold. "You've underestimated me before, Zarak. You'll regret it." The corridor erupted into violence. Gunfire flashed, echoing against the metal walls. White Feather moved like liquid steel, each shot precise and lethal. The Marauder squad fell one by one, caught between her sharpshooting and Kale's quick-thinking sabotage. Kale jammed communications and triggered electromagnetic pulses that disrupted enemy weapons, turning their strength against them. Yet Zarak was no ordinary opponent. He advanced with brutal efficiency, his own weapon roaring with deadly power. White Feather dodged and weaved, the dance of combat pushing her reflexes to their limits. Close enough now, she drew a combat knife, steel-kissed with promise, and met his charge with a fierce parry. Their struggle was a violent storm, every clash ringing with years of enmity. Zarak's strength was formidable, but Whitefeather's agility and tactical genius gave her the edge. With a swift, decisive movement, she disarmed him, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. Zarak's eyes burned with fury, but before he could recover, a flash of light, a carefully timed EMP grenade, silenced his advantage, plunging the corridor into a flickering haze of malfunctioning electronics. The Marauders' morale fractured. Confusion and fear rippled through their ranks as systems failed and communications fell silent. Whitefeather seized the moment, rallying Kale to their feet. "This way," she commanded, sprinting toward the station's docking bay. Behind them, the Marauders scrambled to regroup, their shouts mingling with the wail of sirens. The pair navigated a labyrinth of corridors, their path marked by traps Whitefeather had planted earlier, explosions and barriers slowing pursuers to a crawl. Every second gained was a thread of survival. Kale's breath was ragged, but his eyes gleamed with renewed hope. "I thought I lost you," he muttered, voice thick with emotion. Whitefeather glanced back, a rare softness in her gaze. "You never had a chance to be lost." They burst into the docking bay just as reinforcements flooded the station. A sleek escape ship waited, small but fast. Whitefeather wasted no time, powering up the engines as Kale manned the weapons console, ready to fend off attackers. The Marauder forces surged, desperate to reclaim their prize. Laser blasts scorched the bay's walls, sparks raining around the fleeing ship. Whitefeather guided the vessel out of the station's hangar with practiced hands, dodging debris and hostile fire. The engines roared, propelling them into the starry abyss beyond the station's orbit. Kale exhaled deeply, the weight of captivity falling from his shoulders. "We made it." Whitefeather's eyes were sharp, already scanning the horizon for threats. "This isn't over," she warned. "Zarak will come after us harder than ever." Their bond had deepened in the crucible of danger, a partnership forged in fire and trust. The galaxy watched, aware that Whitefeather was no longer just a shadow on the fringe, but a force to be reckoned with. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Whitefeather set their course toward the unknown, ready to face whatever darkness awaited. The rescue was a victory, but the war was just beginning. The stars outside the cockpit stretched into streaks of light as Whitefeather piloted their ship away from the war-torn remnants of the Marauder station. The hum of the engines was steady, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Kale sat nearby, the faint bruises on his face a testament to the brutal captivity he had endured, but his eyes held a fierce light, the kind that only survived when hope refuses to die. They had escaped, but the scars of the fight ran deeper than flesh and metal. Whitefeather leaned back, letting a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding escape her lips. "We're not safe yet," she said, voice low and measured. "Zarak won't just let this go. He'll regroup, strike back with more firepower, more mercenaries." Her fingers traced the edge of the control panel, a habit when thoughts spiraled. Kale's gaze met hers, unwavering despite the exhaustion. "We can't keep running. We need to be ready." Her nod was slow, thoughtful. "Agreed. But first, we heal. Then, we strike." The quiet hum of the ship filled the space between them, carrying the weight of unspoken fears and silent determination. Kale's hand brushed a comm badge clipped to his uniform, a symbol of their fractured alliance, a tether to the wider fight they'd been thrust into. Whitefeather glanced at him, searching. "Tell me what you remember. Every detail about their network, their supply routes. We need leverage." Kale's expression hardened as memories surfaced. "Their stronghold isn't just this station. It's a network, hidden bases across multiple systems, arms dealers, corrupt officials. Zarak's reach runs deep." His voice carried the gravity of a man who had glimpsed the beast's claws beneath the surface. Whitefeather absorbed the information like a sharpened blade. "We dismantle that network piece by piece. Hit them where it hurts." As they plotted their next move, the ship's sensors flickered suddenly, picking up an unidentified vessel trailing their course. Whitefeather's instincts flared, a predator stalking its prey. She accessed the ship's communication channels, but no response came. Her eyes hardened. "They've found us." Kale reached for a weapon, but she stopped him. "Not yet. Let's see what game they're playing." Minutes stretched as the unknown ship closed in, weapons locked and systems primed. A tense silence hung in the cockpit, broken only by the crackling of the comms. Then a voice emerged, rough, cold, unfamiliar. "You escaped the trap, but you can't hide forever, White Feather. Zarak sends his regards." The message was clear. The fight was far from over. White Feather's fingers danced across the controls, preparing countermeasures. "Then let him come. We'll be waiting." Kale's eyes flicked between the sensors and her face, admiration and trust mixing with the weight of responsibility. Together. As the unknown ship loomed closer, the past battles faded into a backdrop of steely resolve. This was no longer just a rescue mission. It was the beginning of a war that would shape the fate of countless worlds. The galaxy's silence held its breath, and somewhere in the vastness, White Feather's legend grew, a warrior, a protector, a force that refused to be broken. The stars awaited the storm.